Welcome, fellow humans. Today I'm going to talk about sleep paralysis and sleep paralysis hallucinations. They are terrifying. So, a while back when I was in college, I had a single, so I didn't have a roommate, and I had an absolutely terrible sleep schedule, if you could even call it that. I generally wasn't getting enough sleep. I would just try to catch up with little naps whenever I had the time, and so my sleep quality was very poor. One time, I had taken a nap and I woke up in the evening and I could not move. This is sleep paralysis. I would later learn about this. At the time, I hadn't read about sleep paralysis and didn't know anything about it, but I was a psychology student and I had a general understanding of sleep. And so I figured, okay, I just woke up from sleep. You're generally not moving during sleep. This must be some variant of that where my body isn't doing the right things. And so I just had to kind of hope that it would wear off because I couldn't move, and so I couldn't do anything about it. And that was disturbing. I couldn't do anything to get help. But what made it worse was that I heard somebody sounding really aggressive and violent in the hallway. And I couldn't move. But I figured, okay, I'm in my dorm room and I'm really far away from them. And there are also a whole bunch of other people who are in the dorms. So if there's a problem, hopefully somebody else will call campus security. I can't do anything about it. And he started heading toward me, toward my dorm room. Like, not necessarily aiming for my dorm room, but he was getting closer. I could hear this violent, aggressive man who was clearly just very, very angry. And it was very disturbing. But my door was locked, and I didn't think that he would, necessarily come at me. So I just had to hope this wouldn't be a problem because I was paralyzed. And it just felt so frustrating as he kept coming closer and closer to my dorm room. My dorm room was all the way at the end of the hall. I was, at the very, very end. He had to go all the way down the hall and not sidetrack for other dorms in order to get towards mine. And yet, I had no luck, and that's exactly what was happening. And then I could hear him outside my door, and he was pounding on the door, trying to get into my dorm room, and I still could not move. And I was so incredibly scared and just hoping, certainly somebody's going to call campus security. Certainly this is going to be dealt with before. Can he break down the door? I don't know. And then he just menacingly, poked his finger through the little peephole in the door, like he was trying to show that he was trying to get at me any way he could. And I was just desperately trying to figure out how I would be able to move because I wanted to call campus security because maybe nobody had. Maybe this is one of those situations of bystander apathy and everybody assumes somebody else is going to be calling and nobody does anything. And finally, I started to be able to move. The paralysis started to wear off, and it was a bit distracting. And as it wore off, I realized that he had gone away. He must have given up because he couldn't get through my door. And I was like, okay, I need to call campus security and report what happened. So I sat on my bed, and before I made the phone call, I said, okay, what I need to do is just go over in my mind everything that happened, review it so I can coherently tell campus security what the situation was. And as I was sitting on my bed, looking at my door and reviewing everything that happened, I just noticed something. My door doesn't have a peephole. It's pure solid wood. It is impossible that he could have done that. And then I realized it didn't happen. There was no aggressive man. There was no threat. It had been something that I had experienced, but it clearly couldn't have been real. It just didn't fit with the facts of reality. And it made a lot more sense that it wasn't real because that was a really weird thing to have happened. And it's also really weird that nobody but me seems to have reacted to it in any way. And so I hadn't heard of sleep paralysis or sleep paralysis hallucinations, but I figured it must have been some malfunctioning of sleep. That somehow, even though I felt fully awake, I must have had a nightmare. And that's basically what it is. They call it a hallucination instead of a dream, because you're awake, I assume. But it's really just your brain going through all the motions of creating a dream, even though you're awake. And by dream, I do mean nightmare. I have never heard of somebody having a positive sleep paralysis hallucination. Maybe there is somebody out there who has. That would be wonderful. I've had several since then. They have all been terrible. And I think that it's more likely for them to be terrible because you are paralyzed, because you're awake and you can't move, and that is an inherently scary situation. But the really big thing was just how terrifying the sleep paralysis hallucination was. It's a hard thing to put into words, but I assure you, it was really terrifying because it had two features, one of which doesn't happen in dreams, and one of which doesn't happen in reality. And in dreams, there's a part of you that knows you're dreaming, even though you're usually not aware that you're dreaming. There is lucid dreaming, which I have discussed, and that's its own thing, but most of the time you're just experiencing the dream. But you only get so terrified in the dream because a part of your brain is aware that you're safe. And I didn't have that with the sleep paralysis. With the sleep paralysis hallucination, the part of my brain that should have been telling me I was asleep and this was a dream was shouting at me that this is real life, I am in real danger, and I need to do something to protect myself. And so that was terrifying in a way that no nightmare can be. But the other thing that was so scary and that doesn't happen in reality was that I had this real sense of menace and aggression and desire to hurt me from the person who was headed toward me. And that's part of what helped me to realize it wasn't real, because I didn't have any way of knowing what he was thinking or feeling. But in a dream, you often do know those sorts of things. You often know things about the situation you have no way of knowing. And so I had that feeling of being aware that he intended to harm me, that he wanted to hurt people, that would have just been a conclusion normally. I might have interpreted the situation differently if I didn't have that certainty that he wanted to hurt people. I might have thought it was just somebody who was really drunk or something like that, and potentially less dangerous. But I knew that this was a violent, dangerous threat that was mean and wanted to hurt me. But I had no way to know that other than my brain was just making that up. Since having that episode of sleep paralysis and not liking it, I have done some reading about sleep paralysis. It's much more likely to happen when you have bad sleep quality, which fit with when it happened for me. It's also more likely to happen if you sleep on your back, which I did do in that incidence. And it's more likely to happen either when you're starting to fall asleep or when you just woke up. I think when you're falling asleep is actually more common, but I very much tend to get it when I have just woken up from sleep. So that's just the way my brain likes to malfunction. There is something you can do if you experience sleep paralysis, at least in theory. What you're supposed to do is, instead of trying to just move, trying to get up, you're supposed to focus on very, very small movements, like moving your toes or just a finger, instead of trying to move an arm or a leg, a bigger body part like that. And they say that if you can get the little motion going, then it helps to unlock your ability to move your body in general. And I like this idea, but I have never managed to actually put it into practice while I'm experiencing sleep paralysis. even having had multiple episodes, I always have trouble remembering that it's a sleep paralysis hallucination while it's happening. And I'm always so scared that I'm not really focusing on, oh, right, remember the thing you're supposed to do and do it correctly, and then you'll be okay. I've had further incidents of sleep paralysis hallucination, and I've been with somebody at the time. I've been sleeping with my partner, and then I just get this added element of being afraid that my partner's going to get hurt too, and that I can't warn my partner. And so instead of feeling safer, I just feel like I'm going to get hurt and I'm going to let down my partner who's sleeping soundly and doesn't realize there's this danger going on. And then when I break out of the sleep paralysis, I go, oh, right, I just had that. That's what happened. But I guess that I'm never sufficiently awake to act intelligently during my sleep paralysis, even though there's a part of my brain that is awake, which is very frustrating. But it is an interesting experience because what you hallucinate is very culturally influenced and very personally influenced, the same way all dreams are, because that's just a nightmare. And some people will get alien abductions or a witch trying to sit on their chest and keep them from being able to breathe, or various other, you know, interesting but impossible sleep paralysis hallucinations. And every single time I get a very mundane threat of somebody trying to break into wherever I'm living and being dangerous and threatening. And I guess that says something about me. I'm not entirely sure what it says, but it's really difficult for me in part, I think, because it's theoretically possible. It hasn't actually happened. I haven't had somebody break into my home, even though obviously that's an experience some people have had. So it's not like I'm reliving something. It's not like I have some really good reason to be particularly afraid of that. I just always have that same mundane fear pop up of somebody dangerous breaking into my home and threatening me and anyone else I care about. And I can't make myself realize that it's not happening. And if I ever do have that happen, then I really hope I don't go, oh, it must just be sleep paralysis. But the odds of it happening while I can't move are very, very low. So it's probably not going to be an issue. Anyway, that's my story. And if you liked it, please click like. And if you know someone who might find it interesting, then share. If you'd like more similar content, then of course subscribe. But most of all, if you have any questions, thoughts, similar experiences, I expect some of you out there have also had sleep paralysis, then I would love to read your comments. Thank you.